Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, and welcome back to The Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Thank you for joining me. I know it's been a little while, and as you can probably hear in my voice, I've been a little under the weather for the past, couple months, really. So hopefully, after everything devolving into pneumonia last week, hopefully this will be the tail end of sickness for the rest of my life. No, but because I'm having a difficult time a little bit with the coughing and the scratchy voice, and also because I just love having this one particular special guest on over and over again, I've brought back the husband.
The husband is back. This is an interesting podcast setup because I can hear you, but I can't see you.
I can see you.
We're in a very dark room.
There aren't enough working outlets.
And the computer is shining in my face, and your silhouette is there, but
is it lovely?
But I don't see a mouth moving or anything, so this will be fun.
You'll hear my voice, which is something. It's something to behold and hear right now. So as I mentioned, I've been under the weather. I know I haven't been doing as many podcast episodes. I was an unexpected and unplanned hiatus. And I know a few weeks ago I said, I'm back. I'm going to keep doing it. And then I got sick again. So,
Well, we also moved to Wisconsin. You're pregnant. And,
there's a lot going on.
There's a few other things going on.
Which is probably why I wound up with pneumonia in the first place.
Yeah, but
I'm off the meds. Excuse me. Only wheezing slightly.
But we're here now.
We're here
that's
now.
What matters.
And I'm excited to talk about this because this topic that we have lined up, because man, it's just, you can't get away from it right now, and we have to take a stance.
Mm-hmm.
And let me backtrack a little bit. This we're going to talk about abortion today and the new legislation, and apparently, according to Joy Behar of The View, the war on women that the conservative Republican men
trying to set them back 50 years
or 75 years. They just want us pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so Pat and I have had the wonderful pleasure over the past 10 years, pretty much, of working out in a gym in Exton, the Dragon Gym, where we met actually, and do kettlebells. And it's not a typical big box gym. So we have not, and we don't watch television. We stream movies, and we stream EWTN programming on YouTube.
Father
Spitzer's Universe, Old Mother Angelica episodes. So we are like really far out from typical television viewing. Well, now we've moved to Wisconsin, and unfortunately we can't go do our kettlebell workouts at the Dragon Gym. So now we are at a big box gym, which I was thinking about that between the televisions on the exercise equipment and the televisions hanging from the ceiling. There's got to be 100. Right?
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. You're bombarded, and it's like you can turn one off, but then there's 3 others surrounding you. You just can't escape it. It's really obnoxious.
As much as I don't even like television, I can't not look.
Yeah. I mean, how are you not going to look?
I know. Excuse me. So, I had the unfortunate opportunity of getting onto a treadmill to do a little bit of walking the other day, trying to get my wind back up. And lo and behold, at the end of the commercial break, The View comes on, which I've never liked. And if you're not familiar with The View, I mean, it's just a panel of, I don't know, is it 5 women? 4 are pretty liberal, like exceedingly liberal. And then there's one kind of conservative voice that they don't let speak a lot.
And just to be clear, I've never watched it, but except for the clip that we're going to talk about, and it was
you're not missing
it was worse than I expected. And
this is what millions of viewers are hearing on a daily basis. I used to watch the Ellen DeGeneres show during the summer break when I was in high school, and I think The View came on right after that. And I turned it off within like 10 minutes. I never watched it because it's my worst nightmare of women in an echo chamber it was just spewing. So even 10 or
just
20 years ago,
whooping each other up.
Yeah,
well, Whoopi Goldberg. There you go. Yeah. And what didn't she play a nun in a movie once? Why is it?
No, she wasn't a nun. She was hiding out in a convent.
Oh, okay.
So she wasn't. She was just pretending to be one.
Okay. I thought she faded into obscurity, but I guess
not.
Not.
The view brought her back.
She's maintained relevance apparently. Okay.
So the clip was right. It was about 5 minutes of just great discomfort for me. And I as I'm watching this, I'm getting so angry about what they're talking about with, the war on women, because women are being told that they can't kill humans now in a few different states. And I was walking faster and faster, which was making me wheeze a little bit because of this bout of pneumonia. But anyway, I decided I did something productive. And besides just saying angry things in my head, I decided to pray the rosary with the intention of hoping to end the culture of death and people actually respecting all life. And then I thought, well, I want to do something on top of that. So here we are. We're going to do an episode because we've talked about this. As more and more states legislate against abortion, more and more of these idiotic I can't even think of the word now.
I've never seen
counter arguments.
Yeah,
are going to just keep coming out of the woodwork, and I keep getting into arguments on the internet, because I just can't let it go. Well, it's just so stupid. These ideas that people are coming up with. We hate women,
and I don't like.
It's all old white men.
I don't like seeing your blood pressure get up, dear.
But, I have very good low blood pressure as is, so that's good.
But it is. I think it is very important for people in the pro-life movement. Catholics, anybody who just values the dignity of human life, let's be perfectly frank, this is a time where we have to fight the battle. We have to fight the culture war because there is a certain momentum here, and these radical ideologues on the left who have really parked their morality and their ability to murder innocent human beings, children. You're seeing them freak out. You're literally seeing them freak out. And it's understandable when you really think that your fundamental rights involve the slaughtering of innocent people, and there's this growing movement saying, hey, you might be doing something wretchedly evil there. One can understand. It's it shines a light on a significant moral failing, and I don't think that that's something people easily want to concede. But you see these crazy mental gymnastics and contortions of logic, if you can even use the word logic to apply to these people at all, to try and justify one of the most really abhorrent acts that you can possibly think of. So it is very important that we spend time looking at what they're saying and just dispassionately analyzing the validity and soundness of their arguments. I said to you earlier before that if you ever just want to win an argument, like an easy argument, just be pro-life, because the pro-choice side is so vacuous and dull. There's a reason why good professional ethicists, pro-life ethicists, can almost never find a debate opponent on the pro-choice side. They all pretty much refuse, because like this Brian Sims guy, they often say extremely radical things. That they often get they sometimes get violent. Even some of the messages I know that colleagues of mine have received by voicing just pro-life support, the radical messages of threats that they've received online is quite insane. So we do have to fight this battle, because it seems like there's a momentum here for real moral justice to actually happen, even if it's just on a state-by-state basis. So, like I said, even though I don't like seeing your blood pressure get up, it is something that I think we have to engage in, in a serious way. In a charitable way, of course. We can't resort to the nasty tactics that they're using, but we have to be bold. We have to stand up for life. We do. Mm-hmm.
I would say that any of the arguments that I've gotten into after they go through the usual tropes, what about when this exceptional hard...
We have to stand up for life. We do. Mm-hmm.
I would say that any of the arguments that I've gotten into after they go through the usual tropes, what about when this exceptional hard case happens, or it's not it's not even a human yet, or whatever else.
It's not that was my favorite. That was a CNN one where some woman said, "What is in a woman? The baby is not a human." Well, what is it?
Yeah, what species?
Does it start out as a gazelle and then it becomes an antelope, and then once it gets to the birth canal, the magical birth canal with the fairies, and then this birth canal that for some of them somehow confers rights. Didn't have rights 3 seconds before, but goes through the magic of the birth canal and somehow is conferred fundamental human rights. Well, not even anymore in the state of New York, apparently, where even if they're through it, you can still put the kill, murder the baby. So the magic birth canal, they might even be losing that pathetic argument. But yeah, they're so what is it? I can't imagine.
And you know what? You ask what it is, and it's
shrimp?
usually it's a clump of cells. It can't make its own decisions yet. But once you get through these usual tropes, especially online, they resort to bullying and name calling. And so every argument that I've gotten into, I think I've done a good job. Now in the past, Pat, you have taught me how to be a better debater, because in the past I probably would have done the same thing. I would have resorted to insulting their intelligence, calling them names, and I don't do that anymore.
Well, it's very easy when somebody is taking that tact against you. The first thing you want to do is kind of fight fire with fire. But yeah, it's really important we don't do that.
No, because it just, especially, I mean, I've said this before, you don't know who's reading or looking or listening in to these conversations, and the best defense and offense is to be as clear and coherent and charitable as possible. Be as clear and coherent and charitable as possible, and not resort to those bully tactics.
That's right. So the keys as I'm sure we'll discuss in this episode, for being an effective, I mean, well, third time's the charm, for being an effective advocate for life, is to make sure you stay focused on the fundamental issues and don't get distracted either by insults, ad hominems, or even red herrings, because sometimes they'll try and take you down paths that are not relevant to the fundamental issues. So you have to be careful of that as well.
And once you get used to this, it becomes very easy to have these arguments without having to think so much about making sure that you don't do those less than desirable tactics.
Yes. I mean, one of the examples we'll give an example from The View. One of the first thing was that this Joy woman, the one that with the kind of red hair.
Desirable tactics.
Yes. I mean, one of the examples we'll give an example from The View. One of the first thing was that this Joy woman, the one that with the kind of red hair.
Joy Behar. I think
her. What is she from, by the way?
I think she was a comedian. These are people who are just like barely holding on to their relevancy.
Okay, I honestly just don't. I never have heard of this woman before, ever. And maybe she's very funny. I don't know. She could be a great comedian. Who knows? But it's not relevant here. She made the classic economic argument, right? Where the kids in Georgia are as good off as kids in other states or whatever. So therefore we should kill them. Right? That's your conclusion, right? Because kids aren't going to be as well off in Georgia, we should just abort them. Like, does anybody try and put these together in a form of a syllogism and see, like, in what world would that ever be morally permissible in any circumstance? Should we just go down there with a Gatling gun and just finish them off? Like, what I mean, like, and think of, like, from the economic, because you'll often hear it from the other side, is that, oh, well, if the woman can't get abortion, she's going to be really economically hurt in life. She isn't going to be able to advance in her career or whatever. This is a really sick moral argument. I mean, it was the same argument that people made to keep slavery in place in the South. They said, if we abolish slavery, the economy will be ruined. And guess what? They were right. The economy was ruined. But what people understood, rightly, not everybody, of course, but what we understood is that economic considerations are far, far, far apart, and at best far secondary to the fundamental dignity and respect of the human person foremost. So it's totally the only, and here's one tip that I'll give anybody in a pro-life. If you just remember these things, it can help you center your arguments. When we think about economic, the only reason we think these things are valuable is in an instrumental sense. So remember the word instrumental, right? they're valuable insofar as they're attached to someone that has value, right? It's because we value human beings that we care about such things as economic well-being, right? It's because we value human beings that we feel like they do deserve a right to privacy. But the only thing that is of intrinsic value here and not instrumental value is the human being, the person, himself or herself. And that is what is fundamentally at issue. So you can't take something of instrumental value like privacy or some type of economic consideration and try and put that over the thing that is of intrinsic or fundamental value, which is human life, because that's the only thing that gives these other things value anyways. They only have value in a sort of borrowed sense that human life has value to begin with. The fundamental point that pro-life people have to continue to push. The only reason privacy matters is because we value human life. The only reason economic consideration matters is because we value human life. And you have so many of these examples come down to people kind of subverting that and wanting to put the thing of instrumental value over the thing of intrinsic value. And then it just makes no sense, right? It makes no sense at all to think of economics or privacy if we've already just essentially conceded that human life, the thing that it's attached to, has no value to begin with.
Right. So people usually put the cart in front of the horse and go for the instrumental value, or they just deny biology.
Yeah, they become themselves science deniers.
Yeah, right. The ones that are, yes, right. The non-religious, secular science promoters suddenly forget that science does affirm that if you have a human parent, a human mother, and the mother is pregnant, there is a human being inside of it.
It's not a gazelle.
It's not a gazelle. It's not a clump of cells. So they didn't. And I should say before we go on,
or to the extent that it is a clump of cells, well, guess what? It's still a clump of cells when it's 10 years old, when it's 35 years old. That's just a stupid saying. It's just totally meaningless.
Yeah. And it's not part of the woman's, it's not the same as the woman's body until it comes out.
Yeah.
Suddenly women don't have two hearts.
Yeah, I mean, if we really wanted to be like that, Joy Behar or whatever, look, you're just a collection of fermions and bosons. That's all it is, right? So
we can just do away with you.
Just blow you away, right? It's just...
So I realize as we're watching, because we don't have a cable subscription that we could watch the full clip, I'm realizing as we're talking, we didn't hit all of this because they still talked about the one host who said that she's pro-life but doesn't want to put her opinions on anybody else. She didn't want to tell anybody else to do that cowardly position.
Yeah.
And they also talked about ectopic pregnancies, and we didn't hear that when we were reviewing the clip.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's important to understand that and this is where we aired that episode with my friend Peter, who is himself a bioethicist, and he will be the first to tell you that it's not like, in the pro-life position, you have to keep remembering it's not just the life of the baby we care about, but the life of the mother, the life of everybody. We respect human dignity all throughout. So it's not like these hard cases aren't considered or that they can't be successfully navigated. They actually can be, and you have the doctrine of double effect and all. You can get pretty technical with all of that. But the general thing is, never do you use hard cases or exceptions to inform the rule. So that's the first thing people have. Because there's hard cases in pretty much any moral situation, right? But we don't use the hard cases to inform the rule. But as for, and we can kind of circle back to, right? But we don't use the hard cases to inform the rule. But as for, and we can kind of circle back to that as well. But the other thing you brought up was, what was it again?
Ectopic?
No,
or not wanting to impose your...
Oh, that's the one. Yeah, not wanting to impose. I mean, you really have to think about this through here, right? Because this is a fundamental question. If you believe that human life has intrinsic moral worth, right? And that's what's kind of good about the abortion debate. I say kind of good because it's horrible that we even have to have it. But I guess the one good thing that can come out of this is it really... to have this debate should force somebody to really examine all the foundations of their entire worldview, Because that's really the first thing is, do you think that human life has it has intrinsic moral worth? And if so, where do you think that comes from, right? And that's a fair question to know, which almost nobody does, right? Unless their back's really against them. But if they say no, then, well, I don't need to take your opinion then, because it's not coming from a valuable person, so it's not valuable, right? So it immediately undermines their own position. If human life isn't valuable, then any opinion that human life utters is clearly not valuable either. So we can write that one off. But most people, most honest, sincere people will say, yeah, I think human life does have value. And that's enough to get the argument off the ground. You don't have to go into any religious foundations for that. And I think that there's obviously people who are, atheist or agnostic, and they would still say the same thing. I would say that philosophically, they probably wouldn't be able to support that or work it out, but that's fine. Just to get the argument going, we can at least find that point of ground. And then you just have to ask them if you think that since human life has value, if it's morally acceptable to take an innocent human life, to murder somebody. That's what it means. And that's what it means. And again, I think most people are going to come down and agree that, yeah, it seems like if anything is wrong, the taking of innocent human life is wrong. And then you just kind of start to put the pieces together. Is that okay? If human life starts at a conception, if it has human parents, I'm sorry to the woman on CNN to inform her of this fact, it is a human. It's not a shrimp. It's not a gazelle. That is a human. It has all the genetic information of a unique life right at the moment of conception. The pro-life side has all the science, all the biology, I would say all the philosophy as well. The pro-choice side can do nothing. They can do nothing but really become science deniers and perform all kinds of crazy contortions to try and get out. I mean, you have even radical leftist ethicists like Peter Singer will concede this. Of course they will say. He says, abortion is the ending of a human life. That's exactly what it is. And he'll just take it even radical leftist ethicists like Peter Singer will concede this. Of course they will say. He says, abortion is the ending of a human life. That's exactly what it is. And he'll just take it even outside of the womb. So it's funny because he's one of the few people who is kind of consistent with his radical kind of left positions on this, but the left hates him because he is consistent, because he just takes it like he thinks that you should be able to, if society deemed it okay to murder toddlers, then that's what society would deem okay. So you might as well do that. So he just kind of lets the barn out of the horse, so to speak, so that they don't like him very much. I think he's crazy, but I appreciate that he exposes their ideology for the insanity that it is. And once you have that, right, if it's growing, it's alive. If it has human parents, it's human. Clearly, it's innocent, right? It could never have done any sort of moral wrongdoing at this stage in its life. So it is wrong. In the hierarchy of human rights, right, no other rights make sense without the right to life, the right to privacy, the right to property, the right to speech. All of these, again, are only instrumental. They're valuable only in a derivative sense that humans have intrinsic moral worth or a fundamental right to life. And that has to be the starting point of the conversation. And you have to keep drawing it back to these fundamental points above anything else, because they will try to take you down various economic arguments, or, well, what if this kid has a really hard time growing up, or you hear these, and you'll have to remind me of some of the examples that you've heard. It'll probably be better if we go through some of the specifics that you've hit recently, along with I just keep bringing up the economic one because that's the one that this Joy lady brought up on The View, and it's pretty common. You'll hear it in different forms, but it always comes down to some type of economic wealth. That's the one that this Joy lady brought up on The View, and it's pretty common. You'll hear it in different forms, but it always comes down to some type of economic welfare, right?
Excuse me. Yeah. And to follow up on that point, it doesn't matter what your personal experience is or your personal preferences are in terms of evangelizing the pro-life stance. So say like the one host that we didn't, when we were looking at the recap, Pat, that we didn't hear from, but we saw on the TV at the gym. She said, "Well,
hold on, because I didn't even answer the question we set off. It's like, oh, well, I think that, but I don't think I should impose my views on anybody, right? Well, that's the fundamental thing. Like, if the government has any role at all in protecting human rights, the one thing it must protect above all is the right to life. That's why legislation actually makes it would not make any sense not to legislate this. Like, it has to be in the league. This has to be something, because like it or not, people actually get, I would say somewhat unfortunately, they get a lot of their moral teaching from the legal system because they equate legality with morality. I'll never forget the number of faces in like my philosophy 101 class when the professor brought up the question, is something moral just because it's legal? And it's like the kids never even thought about that before. So people do look at the legal system and they think, oh, well, it's legal, so it must be okay, right? And they really do believe this. So the legal system is a signaling device. So it's there to prevent bad people from doing bad things. It is there as a deterrent, but it's also there to inform people who are otherwise maybe not thinking about these things, and they just kind of look at the way society is, and they just assume a lot of the culture, and that helps to that forms their moral conscience. So of course this is something that you need to propose, in the same way that people rightfully fought for the freedom of those who were in one that is any more diabolical than this.
Yeah. So, like the one host who said that she doesn't like to impose her feelings on other people, and I've talked with a woman from our old church who said that she just doesn't, she wants to be sensitive to other people's experiences. So, but like a general squeamishness about talking about this fundamental right. It doesn't matter what your personal experience is, and it also doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't change those moral truths. So I got into an argument with a man who said that he is a man, doesn't have a uterus, and is not impregnating anybody anytime soon. So he has no right to an opinion on abortion.
Yeah,
and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Even if you've never owned a slave, you can still be against slavery. Even if you've never beaten up a puppy, you can still have an opinion on the fair treatment of animals.
And next time cancer, like, are you going to go to the doctor and be like, excuse me, doctor, if you have cancer before, I only want a doctor that's had cancer. No, you want a doctor that knows what he's doing or knows what she's doing, right? Regardless of whether or not they've had cancer, is more or less irrelevant. You just want somebody who has expertise. Now, to the other point of the whole gender thing is it's so dumb, right? Because first off, it's just an ad hominem. It's a personal attack. Arguments don't have genders, right? The quality of my argument or your argument doesn't change whether it comes out of my mouth or your mouth. It's the same argument. So you'd be like, okay, this guy's saying it, but hold on, let me, here's my wife. Now she'll say it. Does that change the argument? Like, does anything really change? No, it doesn't. So you have to press them on that. You have to say, look, you need to address the argument, not my genital equipment, because it's not about the genital equipment. It's about the truth of the argument that I'm presenting, and you have to address the argument. So that's one of those diversionary tactics. That's one of those sort of red presenting, and you have to address the argument. So that's one of those diversionary tactics. That's one of those sort of red herrings that you have to constantly be on the look for. I will say, kind of from a prudential standpoint, it's often helpful to have women making these arguments, just because so many people are conditioned by this nonsense. But men, you need to speak out for this, because it's a sort of hand waving dismissal. It's not an argument at all. And you need to keep pressing forward that. And you need to make those points that we just made when that gets brought up.
It's very sexist coming from a population, a loud, angry minority of the population who has been claiming to be the victims of sexism for such a long time, and they're just turning the tables on it.
It is incredibly sexist, right? It's just saying, well, because you have, first off, how rude of them to assume gender in the first place, right? But even beyond that, it's just saying, because you have a certain set of genitals, therefore your argument's totally sexist, right? It's just sort of an arbitrary writing off of the value of somebody's opinion or argument based entirely on just, biological factors that are beyond their control. If you did that for skin color, you would be rightfully deemed a racist.
So we've got the economic argument, which again doesn't make any sense, and it also let
me see if I can find I thought I saw a gem online today that I wanted to bring up. So let me just see.
Well, there's been so many, and I got to say, I've a lot of these arguments that I've gotten into at some point, besides the name calling, they just say, well, I don't have time for this anymore. And when you get to that point, it's really because they've run out of their only known arguments and they just don't know what else to say, because really and truly, they know that this is wrong. And they know it. They really, really do. But when you back them up against a wall with all these, and they just don't know what else to say, because really and truly, they know that this is wrong. And they know it. They really, really do. But when you back them up against a wall with all these actual scientific facts, philosophical facts, they just can't do anything but bow out and say, look, and they'll very high-minded. It's like, well, look, I respect your opinion, but it differs, and I just don't. This is a waste of my time now. I've gotten that a lot. It's not a waste of time if you're going to save a life. Now, of course, as we're going through all this, and I've said this many times, it's not the point of an argument isn't to win it; it's to save a soul. So you don't want to be mean or bullying with any of this, but you do need to be firm as you take these stances, because again, it may not be them necessarily, because a person, especially a person,
here's
but it might be somebody who's looking in. All right, got it.
Yeah, this is on the Instagram thing. Anti-choice people, that's us. Anti-choice people. So first off, let's just say something about anti-choice. Nobody in society has the unlimited ability to make any choice they want, right? Nobody has that. So in a sense, we're all anti-choice. Nobody thinks that I should just have the choice to go out and just strangle somebody on the street for fun, or to just strangle a toddler out in his backyard just because that's how I get my fancies, right? Nobody has this, right? All society reasonably and responsibly limits people's choices for the betterment of society, to protect human life, to protect fundamental human rights. This is a reasonable and responsible thing that everybody agrees on in the vast majority of circumstances. But for some reason, when it gets down to the precious life of the unborn, we're just trying to set women back 50 years, or 50 years is a new one. I usually hear back to the Dark Ages, right? It's always to the
I think it must be pre-Roe.
To the Dark Ages, right? It's always to the
I think it must be pre-Roe v. Wade, back alley abortions. We're all there. Everybody's going to die.
Yeah,
but it's okay. It's okay if a baby dies, but not the mother. And that's a developmental bias. So the person who's been alive longer has more value than the one who doesn't. So the person who is in a paraplegic, are they more valuable than the paraplegic? Is the person who has Down syndrome less valuable than the person who does not have this mental handicap?
And this is the problem with the pro-choice side. What's the pro-murder side? Sorry if we're using these terms if we're anti-choice. And I actually suggest don't do that when you're getting into comment, because if you use pro-murder, it's just going to make it so much more inflammatory.
It's
so
already
just understand
enough.
how we're talking about it on this podcast is not how I would talk about it if I was seriously sitting down with somebody who disagreed. I would want to try and find common ground. Talking about it on this podcast is not how I would talk about it if I was seriously sitting down with somebody who disagreed. I would want to try and find common ground. So we're trying to just show you the how to engage with these arguments from a material standpoint, but there's also the sort of manner, right? So there's the matter of the arguments themselves, but then there's the manner of how you should go about it, and that's different.
And we've talked about this in the podcast before, and I do have a blog post. I think it's called the pro-life arguments that you need to know, and that goes through these as well.
Yeah. So if you think that human life has intrinsic moral worth, if you think that humans actually beget other humans when they procreate, I don't know what else it could possibly be, and life begins at inception. Conception. Man, I told you I have mud brain today, so it's not a good day to bring me on a podcast for arguments. And that it's absolutely reasonable and responsible to have laws in society that protect that human life. That's something that just naturally falls out. So yeah, in a sense, we are anti-choice, as everybody is anti-choice on some things. Just like, and it's so funny, because so many of these people who are advocating this pro-choice position are the most anti-choice people when it comes to pretty much everything else, right? They're certainly anti-choice on the Second Amendment. They're anti-choice on free speech. They will pretty much want to deal away with free speech. They're anti-choice for how many businesses want to be run. They want to force businesses to operate a certain way, especially with how they, establish their bathrooms for various genders. So they seem perfectly fine with wanting to limit everybody else's choices and butting into everybody else's business almost all the time. But suddenly when it comes to, just being able to wantonly murder your own children, that I got a somewhat of a chuckle of on Instagram. Anti-choice people are not trying to stop abortion. They are trying to legislate who can and cannot have abortions because conservative politicians, their wives and mistresses and daughters are always going to be able to get an abortion somewhere. Now, this is the exact type of red herring. This is the perfect type of bait that people always fall for, right? Because this is going to be something where you're then going to try and get into defending the Republican Party or conservatives, and they're going to try and bring up that conservative who did pay off a mistress to have an abortion, and that you don't want to go there because that's obviously that's something that we would greatly condemn. And the funny thing is that's something that they condemn too. But why should they condemn that? Like, shouldn't that be praised in their world? Right? It's kind of inconsistent that they like look down on that because to them I thought this was like a heroic thing to have an abortion. So it's just kind of weird there. But what you have to do is say, hey, even if that's true, right? Even if that's true. Right, even though I can see that there's nasty conservative Republican politicians who go out and do abortions, right, that still doesn't make abortion right. Abortion is still wrong. So making sure you don't fall for these diversionary tactics and you keep coming back, be like, I can concede that maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the only reason they want to legislate it. But even if that's true, it's still the right thing to do because human life still has value and it deserves to be protected.
Yep. Another diversionary tactic would be to say, well, hey, what have you done personally to help women who may otherwise have gotten an abortion? What are you doing for children in the foster care system? How many kids have you adopted? And I love this actually because, one, again, even if the only thing that you are capable of doing at this moment is being pro-life, you are doing something to help those people. Mm-hmm. You are doing something to help mothers, fathers, and babies. But I just saw a post the other day, and I loved it so much. It was, I think, from March for Life. A very, very smug person on Twitter said, hey, how many of you guys have pro-lifers have done anything for disenfranchised youth or whatever? I'll wait. And within like an hour, she had 4,800 replies from people who have actually done great things. But it's just another diversion because it doesn't matter that if you personally can't house, a crisis pregnant woman with a crisis pregnancy, or you can't donate hundreds of dollars every month to a charity that does that. If you were pro-life, you are valuing human life, and that includes the mother who may be having a difficult time, helping the father who may need help becoming a father, and the baby, of course.
Yeah, this is, again, one of those classic diversionary tactics. But again, if there's somebody murdering somebody else, doesn't mean that I then have to pay for that guy's college education just because I don't want them murdered, right? We don't apply this principle in any other scenario, so it's completely arbitrary for them to try and bring it up in the case of abortion. Same thing if people, or even in other countries, right? If there's wars going in other countries, innocent children, women being murdered, and we call for an end for that, it would be ridiculous for people to be like, well, how many of them have you brought into your own home or put through college or fed? You don't, right? And part of this, you can get more technical by saying there's a difference between positive rights and negative rights, in the sense that the negative right is really the right to be not harmed by somebody else. And that's different than positive rights, which it's arguable if positive rights even really exist. Positive rights would be like, I have a right to health care, is what people are saying, or I have a right to you to feed me, or something like that. That's the idea of a positive right. And, it's kind of hard to make sense of positive rights, because for me to have a right to health care and you're a doctor, that means I would have a right to enslave you, which would infringe on your negative right to be a free agent. And so you can make that distinction if you want. I would say that you have a moral duty, to the best extent that you're able, if you see somebody starving, to try and help them out. That's a good moral thing to do. But you certainly are under like all these positive rights in order to establish a negative right. The negative rights are the fundamental, and the most fundamental all is the right to life. Again, all these positive rights that they want to pretend exist, I would call most of them phantom rights, right? Healthcare, education, those make no sense if we aren't first establishing the negative rights. It kind of comes back to the intrinsic and instrumental value thing, right? If we don't first value human life to begin with, then it makes no sense to value all the things that might attribute to a flourish. Negative rights. It kind of comes back to the intrinsic and instrumental value thing, right? If we don't first value human life to begin with, then it makes no sense to value all the things that might attribute to a flourishing human life. So it actually comes back to a lot of the sort of same confusion. So it's, again, very important that you don't get taken down you don't take the smelly fish as a debate, and you keep coming back. And, it's always good to kind of bring up other examples too, and just see how this principle clearly wouldn't apply. Just because I don't want some guy, murdered in a back alley somewhere doesn't mean that I'm going to pay for his college education. Right? It's just, or just because, I don't want some dad beating the crap out of his 12-year-old son doesn't mean that I have to take, his 12-year-old son into my house either. These are just basic fundamental moral principles that everybody affirms in every other context without bringing up these kind of silly protecting each other's fundamental human life for some reason, so long as it's outside of the womb. But once you get inside of the womb, again, the sort of magic of the birth canal or whatever starts coming into play.
Excuse me. One thing that was also on this clip of The View that we didn't see when we recapped was a celebration of the sexual revolution as giving, and it's interesting to me that it's men are the aggressors in all this. They really want the sex, and women are punished by having babies and getting pregnant and all this. So it's men's fault in a lot of this. But the sexual revolution happened so that we can have sex with anybody. And that's a great thing, is what they were coming to a conclusion of. And I'd like to know why. But so this all stems from, besides whatever it is, you can tell somebody, you can have an opinion on anything, but when it comes to sex in any capacity, people really get real wound up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. Those animal appetites start flaring up.
That's right. So this really boils down to, part of it is, being able to, the sexual revolution opened up birth control and getting to have sex without consequences. But it's not even sex without consequences, because then that puts a burden on the child who comes from this as being a burden.
Yep.
What the sexual revolution did was take sex, which is a beautiful thing when done between a man and a woman in marriage, is they separated the unitive and the procreative, and made it unitive only and procreative as the bad thing.
And not even really unitive. They made it utilitarian.
Utilitarian, right? Yeah.
A way of just kind of pleasing oneself and using another person as an object. It's really a very degrading view of sex. And I do think men are largely to blame, but not in the way that the leftists think of it. It's the men on the left object. It's really a very degrading view of sex. And I do think men are largely to blame, but not in the way that the leftists think of it. It's the men on the left and the piggish, irresponsible men that do just want to use women as objects. Of course, abortion benefits them, and it's disgusting. And these men are dishonorable because of that, right? Men stopped being men, of people of men that were supposed to love their, the woman that they were with, care for the woman they were with, raise children. They just wanted to, have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to just, wantonly have sex with who they want, with the idea of not having consequences or commitments or anything like that. So, it is kind of funny, because I would agree, yeah, men have largely been at issue here, but it's not from the perspective of the, the people on the pro-life side at all. Now I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, because I would say that, it certainly, there's that sex is actually far more fulfilling when it is in the context of a monogamous relationship, a committed marriage. So they're really just kind of, only damaging themselves there with their kind of utilitarian approach to sex anyways. But I wouldn't even entirely disagree that men are at fault. I would just say it's not exactly the way that they're trying to portray it.
But and also women are certainly not blameless either, because as this third wave feminism has taken root, women have championed being like the worst of men. So they've taken on masculine qualities when it comes to attitudes about sex, and has really created a culture of death. And really, I mean, studies show people of younger generations are having less sex all the time because they're not with anybody. They're not uniting with anyone. They are using another person or themselves.
Yep.
And are really becoming very, very lonely.
Or like robots coming up seems to be the new thing. The other thing I want to make sure we mention, and we can obviously make this a series ongoing, and I hope people submit their questions, and that may help to direct the conversation next time. And be sure to go back and listen to the one originally with Peter Koch that we aired, because that's
I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely a much that's like the foundational starting point for this. So you want to go back and hear that. Is you'll hear, well, what about the people who are raped, right? And the fundamental, and this is, this often gets people because you have deep sympathy for a grave injustice such as rape. But the principle here is we don't make exceptions for rape, because in no way is it ever moral to repay one injustice with a further, even worse injustice, ever. Like, that is, like, if anything is morally obvious, it's that. You don't repay injustice with, the innocent human child, human life. So do not, in a pro-life position, concede rape exceptions. That is an absolute mistake, because it's saying that just because, and think of how that must make somebody feel. There's so many people who were born in rape. You're really just telling that person that they aren't valuable. That's what you're saying. And what an awful thing that would be to hear. You were born in rape, that because of the way you were conceived, that for some reason your life is not worth as much. So we have to stand strong in those hard cases.
And again, it puts the baby as the burden, and it also does not take into account. Now, I know this does not happen for every woman when she becomes a mother. I understand that this is not the case for everyone, but it also discounts the possibility. One, our biological pieces of us want us to be good parents, because they need that for the biology in us needs that for the continuation of the species. But it doesn't take into account the often transformative power that becoming a mother can have. So even if a child is conceived in rape, doesn't mean that the mother is going to feel burdened by it.
Yeah, and it's we were talking about this before too. Is again not using the exceptions to inform the rule. The rape cases are the vast minority,
less than 1%.
Yeah. Now, that being said, even if they were the majority, it would still hold, right? It would still be immoral to perform an abortion just because a child was conceived in rape, because you don't repay one injustice with an even greater injustice. So even statistically, if it was the other way around, we would still take the same stance. But it is important for people to be familiar with these stats and to realize that this is the vast minority of cases.
Right. And then what it has done, if you do let exceptions inform rules, it paves the way for less than 1% of abortions coming from rape and incest, less than 3% coming to help save a mother's life. It gives about 96% of convenience-based abortions.
Yeah, and as for the ones saving...
Let's talk about that.
Let's wrap that up. We'll come back to that. There are hard cases where the life of the mother is in danger, and I think it's important to think in terms of technology here and why... In the sort of bioethics field, and I'll try and get Peter on my podcast again, because he's obviously the specialist in this. Sometimes we have to make a choice where we're going to save the mother's life, and unfortunately, but unintentionally, the child dies, right? And the analogy that I think is helpful here is it's a tough situation. Two people are out on the ocean drowning, and you have to save one. But yeah, the other one dies. But was that a wrong choice? No, you had to save one person, right? And that's what some of these hard cases are in pregnancy. But what abortion is not that, right? What abortion is it's the direct kill, because the abortion would be more like, okay, maybe I'll go swim and save person A, and unfortunately because of that, person B dies, but I didn't kill them. It was just the nature of the circumstances, right? Abortion is I'm swimming to save person A and I shoot person B on my way, right? And here's the way to think about it. And you have these certain pregnancy situations, like an ectopic pregnancy or whatever. Technology, think in the ways of technology. We're not there yet, but there could be a time in the future. I think there will be a time in the future where we have artificial wombs, and it will be possible to save to save the life of the child extremely early on. And if that's the case, then it goes to show, well, why do you need to kill the child, right? You can just save the life of the mother. We can use these artificial wombs. We can use the technology. So I think
there even are cases now where you can attempt to move the
save the life of the mother. We can use these artificial wombs. We can use the technology. So I think
there even are cases now where you can attempt to move the fetus from the tube to the uterus.
Yeah, which goes to show, like, what is the intent here? Intent is the key word for these hard cases. Again, you can kind of dive into the weeds here of the doctrine of double effect. But the important thing is that the pro-life ethicists have shown that this can be successfully navigated in these very, very difficult cases. But when it comes to abortion, or the intent is to directly kill the human person, that is wrong. Now, if you're trying to just save the human mother's life, and you're doing the best you can to save the baby as well, and then, unfortunately, tragically, the baby dies, but that was never your intention, that's quite different. But as technology increases, that's kind of the kind of tell, isn't it, right? Because, well, if we could, once the technology is there, save both, obviously that's what we should do. And so that should be the intention in hard cases like these.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you want to cover? I think that goes. I mean, this was only like a 5-minute.
Yeah, well, there's so
many.
it's amazing how much nonsense they can. It's one of those things where it's like a really dumb saying can take 30 seconds,
yeah.
30 seconds to kind of shout out at an audience, but then 30 minutes to really show everything that's wrong with it. And that's the problem, honestly, with so much of TV. You get these little sound bites. Very
emotionally driven sound bites.
Very emotionally driven sound bites, and you just don't get any substantive debate or exchange on them. So hopefully we've been able to help people unpack some of this. And, it's late. We're both a little bit under the weather, so hopefully it was articulate enough.
Well, we've done other episodes on this. I will continue to do episodes reminding people messiness come out of the woodwork. And I really think that I love what Pat said, or what you said earlier, about if you can just keep bringing back whatever they say, just keep bringing back the conversation to the intrinsic value of life. Because again, the rights of a mother we should only consider that because she's a human. And if the baby is a human too. So there's also those biological arguments. We can unpack those on another episode. This was more of the post-birth arguments of economics or the hard cases. These are more societal, I feel like, arguments we went through.
And they do tend to kind of avoid biology because it's so against them, right? The science is so against their position that you don't really hear much of scientific arguments.
Well, I don't know. So those are a lot of them that I came across this week. It was a clump of cells. It's not alive yet, but it's not dead. You know what it reminded me of? So in Princess Bride,
those aren't science.
This week, it was a clump of cells. It's not alive yet, but it's not dead. You know what it reminded me of? So in Princess Bride,
those aren't scientific arguments.
No, they're not scientific arguments. But these nonsensical. But they sound like somebody maybe read a biology textbook at some point, which they clearly didn't. But what reminded me of that? Do you remember in the Princess Bride, Wesley is only part dead. He's only half dead or something like that. And then Billy Crystal's character gives him some kind of medicine and he comes back to life. And I remember as a kid, I asked my mom, I was like, can you be like kind of dead? And I was like, no, there's alive and there's dead.
That's right.
There's one or the other. So if this organism is growing, it's alive.
It's alive.
Dead things don't grow.
And if it has human parents,
it's human.
It's human, friends.
Yep. It's not a clump of cells. It doesn't become a human once it can make its own decisions, which a baby can't do.
It is a member
even after it's been born.
It is a member of the human species, included in that human species that we say it therefore has the fundamental rights that we grant to any human. And another thing. So if humans parents, it's human. If it's growing, it's alive. Those are kind of important things to just remember. They're kind of like quickities, if you want to call it that. And then also just do people have value by what they can do or value by what they are? And the pro-life position obviously affirms value by the nature of being human, of what you are. And I think the tricky thing for pro-choice is in order to try and get their conclusions, they really have to base a person's value in what they can do. And that leads down to all kinds of consequences that they do not want to accept and that nobody wants to accept. For example, people having less value because they're less intelligent or they're less physically able, right? Or they're older or they're younger. You cannot successfully navigate that position. So it really comes down to either humans do have value or not what they do, and by the extent that they have value by what they are, then that value begins right at conception.
It's wonderful. I don't think there's anything else to say. At least not this episode. I'll probably think of some other stuff. I don't know, 5 minutes after we
send it in. Send your questions in.
Oh yeah.
Not to me, of course.
No, not to you, because you get enough emails as it is. But you can. I have a contact form on the CatholicMama.com. It's been a while. It's been a while. You can either email me at Christine CHRISTINE at thecatholicmama.com or go to thecatholicmama.com/contact, and there's a form there that you can submit questions. So feel free to do that if you've come across any, or you can find me on Instagram at the Catholic Mama and send me a message or comment on any of the posts, and hopefully I'll see it. If you have any comments or questions, anything else that you would like us to tackle. I did ask a couple of days ago on my Instagram story about some ideas of what people might want to hear on the podcast. So that is other than a pro-life or the abortion debate topic. So I'm always happy to hear those ideas too. I think that might be all that my voice can handle. I need to go drink some hot tea and maybe stream an episode of Mother Angelica.
Sounds like a wonderful way to wind down.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I appreciate everybody's patience as I've been navigating these kind of under the weather past couple months. So I'll be back again soon.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.